In a Violent Nature is an interesting one. If you're explaining the plot, it sounds very familiar. A group of youngsters who are out in the forest for a camping trip steal a gold necklace, which awakens an undead killer named Johnny, who proceeds to hunt them down one by one and pick them off. If I just replaced the killer's name with Jason, you would have absolutely no trouble believing that I was talking about one of the endless string of Friday the 13th sequels. But with In a Violent Nature, there's one crucial difference, which is that the movie is told from the killer's point of view. And to be clear, we're not talking here about a killer who's sentient and who's like having conversations and coming up with schemes. No, we're talking about a mute guy who just walks around and kills people. Big emphasis on walks around. This movie often feels like the slowest first-person shooter ever, and that has drawn a lot of entirely understandable criticism. But for me personally, I think there's a degree of merit here that is often overlooked. Getting into it, I'll start with the bad, which is the characters. As far as characters in slasher movies go, I've seen casts that are significantly more grating and annoying. It's not that I am necessarily hating these characters and like wishing them to die. The reason they're bad is more that they just have absolutely no depth. And that is not helped by the performances, many of which are pretty amateurish. Whatever you say about this movie, you can't deny that the characters are objectively bad. They are lambs for the slaughter and little more. Moving on to the mixed, the first thing that I'm very mixed on is the pacing. This movie is slow. Like, however slow you think it is, it's even slower than that. A very sizable portion of the movie is just watching Johnny from behind as he walks around the forest. And if you think that that sounds absolutely unbearable, then you should probably skip this movie because you're gonna hate it. But personally, I do think that the pacing does have its benefits. Mainly, it just allows us to really enjoy the gorgeous locations. The area where they chose to shoot is just absolutely beautiful, and so in many of the walking scenes, I'm actually not bored because I'm just in awe of what I'm seeing on screen. I guess it's just a vibe that I resonate with. But on the other hand, the pacing is still glacially slow, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't sections where I just got bored. I also have mixed feelings about the dialogue in this movie. It has this very stilted, unnatural quality to it, which I kind of appreciate for how deliberate it feels, but also it feels a bit like a missed opportunity. These filmmakers seem to have it on their minds to kind of skewer slasher stereotypes, and so the very unnatural sounding conversations that people have are kind of amusing on that level. But I also can't help feeling like the movie would have been better if the dialogue was just more natural and run of the mill. That way, during the scenes where Johnny is just hiding in the forest and listening, it would have lent the movie a degree of fun realism. And this goes more broadly for the way that the movie handles slasher cliches, because it's obviously very self-aware about them, which I find some amusement in, but it still does engage in them, which means that it has many of the same flaws of the films that it's imitating. Moving on to the good, there are a few things that I think this movie does really well, starting with the cinematography, which is really good. There's a raw beauty not only to the filming locations, but also to the way that certain shots are framed, and the way that the handheld camera just moves around the subjects. It's really great stuff. Similarly, the sound design is something that really stands out. As tedious as it sometimes becomes, there's still something kind of evocative about these scenes where Johnny is just walking through the forest and all you hear is just the footfalls paired with the sounds of birds and bugs and, leaves shuffling and stuff. There's no score, so the sound design is all we hear, and I gotta say, it knocks it out of the park. Finally, the gore effects are insanely good in this movie. I'm not someone who is usually begging for gory kills, but if you are a gorehound, I am absolutely certain you're going to get something out of the kill scenes in this movie. In a Violent Nature is a strange, slow, but artistic and self-aware slasher that I don't love. I don't even know if it's possible to love it, honestly, but it is an experience that I got something out of for what it's worth, and I can't help but kind of respect it for that. In my opinion, it's a light 6 out of 10.